Hello, and welcome to Confidently Wrong, a show by regular dudes talking with confidence about content we have no right to speak about with any kind of authority, but do it anyway. I'm Wesley Nakamura, and as always, I'm joined by award-winning director Brian Redondo and Savon Jones, aka Captain Bonnie. This is episode 97, and we parachute into James Cameron's gajillion-dollar passion project, Avatar: The Way of Water. I promise it's going to be the best show you've ever listened to, and well, hey, if it's not, you can always ask us for a refund.
Incredible!
Hello, gentlemen. Welcome back to Confidently Wrong. Just been getting flamed for the past 10 minutes here on the show, on the pre-pod.
What 10 minutes plus 39 years of your whole life.
It's true. And these guys were just like having this
39?
whole conversation, and I was like, participating, interjecting, and they just straight up ignored me for the entire time. Like, they wouldn't respond. It was like I was getting iced out of my own podcast conversation, or the podcast I'm supposed to be part of.
Check your internet connection, Wes.
Yeah, this man on mute, and he just gaslit himself into thinking everybody's against him. Look, the people get to hear it here first, y'all. This is what we be dealing with.
We're not icing you out. It's Verizon, my friend.
It was definitely not you guys.
What's the meme with a dude riding a bike and he puts the stick in the wheels and he falls?
Yeah.
And
then
it's
they
like,
blame
why
it on
would
somebody
else. Then they blame it on someone completely different.
But when I told you what happened, you guys were like, that was a good idea. I wish we would have thought of that.
No, I said it would have been funny.
If we could commit that hard.
Yeah, and we could commit that hard to just hard icing somebody out of a conversation for like 5 minutes while they make actual noise. I'd be impressed with the dedication of just me.
One of these days, Wes, we're going to invite you to a party, and everybody's going to be in on icing you out once you arrive. For a whole hour.
Wesley's worst nightmare. Oh my god.
God, that sounds like a dope movie premise. That sounds like a Black Mirror episode.
Well, on this episode, we wanted to talk about one of the biggest movies, I don't even think you could say of the year, one of the biggest movies in terms of who's going to see it of probably the past 5 or 10 years, outside of maybe some of the huge Marvel movies like Endgame. We're going to talk about Avatar: The Way of Water. So we're back in the land of Pandora. We're back with Jake Sully, with Neytiri, I think that's her name, and the land of the Avatarians, the Na'vi.
Before we really dive into this, can we just talk about Wes, your antics for like the past week and a half?
I wouldn't call them antics.
No, I would use the word antics.
Just like refusing.
I would use that word.
Refusing to talk about Avatar on the show. Even though it's the most popular movie out there right now, even though it's
I think
like
refuse is a hard word.
Sci-fi.
I argued against talking about it.
I mean, you would basically double text every other day with like something new you found on the internet to justify why we shouldn't talk about it. Like,
we wasn't even pushing back. We weren't even pushing back like that.
No, I was justifying why it wasn't a good movie, not that we shouldn't talk about it. Towards the end. In the beginning, I was like, I don't think we need to talk about it. But once Savon was like, oh, yo, like everybody's seen it.
That's a bad opinion from the start.
And then I was like, oh, okay, we should talk about it because it's like, it made, I think, $400 million in the US in its first like 3 or 4 weeks of being there. It's made over 1 gazillion billion dollars worldwide. Like, we should talk about it. You're right. Savon was right on that one. He was.
But then
right.
That's not like a weird stance though. Like that's a very uncontroversial, I would say borderline like common sense statement of like, yo, this is one of the biggest movies of the year. We talk about it. And we talk
I
about
just didn't
Top
know
Gun.
it was that big. I didn't think anybody was going to see it.
What?
Oh
In
my
the, it's a. Do you know how much money? It's James Cameron. You know how much
I didn't
money?
know. I didn't think anybody wanted to see it. Everyone took a shit on the first one, and then nobody I talked to was excited to see the second one besides you.
Weirdos on the internet took a shit on the first Avatar. The internet isn't a real place. That's like
The internet wasn't even that big of a deal back then.
It was big, dude.
There was no social media at that point.
my problem is that you went out of your way to even post multiple Instagram stories trying to ask your network of friends, like,
Yeah.
who in their right mind has seen Avatar?
That's not how I framed it.
If you
Not how I
did,
framed it. Not how I framed
bad
it.
was the movie?
I said, "Have you seen it, and did you like it?" That was it. Or what did you think?
And then you had to text us.
This is a mischaracterization of what
Nah, B,
happened.
you gotta see this shit
I said
from our
what?
end.
I
You
said,
gotta see how
did
it
you
look from
see
our
it?
end.
Yes or no? And what did you think? I did no pandering. I used a picture from the movie. I didn't say I didn't like it.
But then you had to do like data
Mischaracterization.
analysis and then
Bruh.
send your results directly to our text group
I
to
did send it to
further
you.
justify why you thought we should not be talking about Avatar.
No, I justified. Well, I was trying to justify why I didn't think it was going to be a good movie, not why we shouldn't talk about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Oh, Lord.
Maybe I misunderstood.
Mischaracterization here.
Peak
My
West.
fault. My
no,
fault.
it's cool. It's no one's
I
fault.
may have
This is great.
miscommunicated.
This
It's
is what
known
makes
to
me-
happen.
Nah, it's cool. You don't rock with Avatar, and this is how it manifests. I think it's just funny.
I
I'm
don't.
here
I don't
for
rock
it.
with Avatar.
Speak your truth.
Hey,
All
yeah, I
right.
mean, I'm one. I love
Really?
conviction, man. I love conviction.
Yeah, at the
so
very least.
if you're gonna do something, go 100 or not at all. So
Yeah.
Confidently wrong. Let's talk about this fire.
When was the first one released? 2008.
2009, I think.
2009. So we're here. It's been a bazillion years. James Cameron wants to tell a new story about Pandora. Before we get into actually this particular new movie, Avatar 2, and there's coming 3, 4, and 5. He's already kind of outlined, which is kind of
Mhm.
crazy. Let's talk about the first one, just as a recap. How did you guys feel about the first one? It seems like Savon, you liked it. Brian, did you enjoy the first one?
I mean, it's been such a long time that I can't remember anything that happened in that first movie.
No, there was a lot of
Other-
memorable moments.
The only thing I remember is Swahelu. Just like the idea of connecting with another animal or with another person or
Yeah.
Navi. And that's their form of intercourse. So they Swahelu with other Navi, but they also Swahelu with the animals. So they're into bestiality. That's all I remember from the movie.
Oh my god.
I didn't even think
because-
about it that way.
You're worse than Wes.
Because me and my friends would always make jokes about Swahelu.
Oh my god, this is just a bit
try
with
to
your
tie our
friends.
that is what Avatar is known for. No,
Gotcha.
but real talk though.
Was
I-
it 2008 peak no homo days, or was this after that?
I want to. Hey, I'm a coastal elite person, so I want to say those days were long gone,
Okay.
before I saw Avatar. But real talk. From what I remember, I was like, yes, great spectacle of a movie. Never want to watch it again. And because it had the most bland, everyday milk toast white guy protagonist doing his white savior thing, and who cares? Nobody wants to see that movie. And it's a lot of blue people. That's all I remember, that and Swahili. So, coming into Avatar 2 with maybe a little bit behind, coming in with a little bit of a handicap.
All right, Savon, you love the first one, right?
Well, how I feel with the first one is I think all the story critiques that Brian has are true, and I more or less agree with. I think especially human Jake Sully is just not a particularly interesting character. And I think that stands. I think what still made Avatar so good at its time and what made me enjoy it is that for the record, I think it's okay for a movie to be carried by just the visual spectacle, the designs, the art, the actual artistry behind the designs, the artwork, the characters, the music, the sequences. It was just absolutely beautiful. And it's something that I've appreciated more in media when I'm older, since I've gotten older, which is why I really enjoyed this movie, the sequel. So I think, yeah, the story critiques are valid, and that probably hurts the replay value of the movie a little bit. But I think some of my core cinema memories are going to just be some of the beautiful sequences I remember of Pandora when I first saw Avatar. Like when you see the floating mountains in the sky that are all these forest mountain trees connected. When they the idea of just being able to connect and bind with everything in nature. I didn't quite see it the way Brian did, but that stuff was what carried the movie for me. So am I going to go rewatch Avatar a bunch of times? Probably not, but it made me have a deeper appreciation for the art behind the scenes that goes into making a movie.
I'm with you on that, Savon.
that movies can be appreciated for their visuals and stuff, even if their story is maybe not quite as strong.
Oh yeah,
Put it like this: there's plenty of movies.
Craft.
There's plenty of movies that have mediocre stories and don't have technical craft, and, have a bunch, and don't have a bunch of those things going for them. Some movies that I think people like. So I think visual storytelling is a very hard thing to do. It's not like, oh, that's the easy way out. It could not have been easy putting together what they did visually and all that for Avatar. That took a lot of creative minds. I just think it's a different type of artistry that, you watch different movies for different things.
I think that's part of my cringe about it, though, is that they spent so much money on this one and the last one, making it visually, people really love the visuals of it, and then there's just no story to support it. And it's like, if you had all that money, hire a good writer.
Well, visual storytelling.
You could have paid the writer 5 times what the highest paid writer gets paid, and your story would have come out better. It just doesn't feel like there's any excuse to have a bad story when you've got this much money being thrown at this movie.
Money doesn't make a good story.
Cameron.
Yeah. Also, money doesn't just make it. I don't want us to get caught in that fallacy of just thinking that you can throw money at a problem and that's what fixes it, right?
It's not. But it's not a problem. You could hire a writer to make a good story.
Yeah, but
or hire a writer who has a good story already.
Yeah, but that's not a money thing. It's just what are we gonna put our time and energy into?
You don't think that writers who have a proven track record in Hollywood get paid more than writers who don't, or who are weaker writers?
I think good writing depends on what you want in the context of the story. I think good writing for some context is bad writing in other contexts.
No,
absolutely.
And just because you wrote one good thing doesn't mean you're going to write another good thing.
No, but people who...
And secondly, I think James Cameron is the writer here.
so he's not going to let anybody else write it.
Whatever James Cameron wants is what's going to get made.
All right.
You get all the good things that come with it. You take the challenges with it too.
That's bad. That's what the Lakers are doing. They're like, hey, you were a good agent, so now you're going to be a good GM. And you get paid all this money, but they don't invest in their coaches, they don't invest in their training staff, they don't invest in their scouting department, and it's like, oh yeah, well Rob Pelinka could do that. We're like, no, he can't. He's not a scout. That's not what his job is.
Does Avatar feel like a bunch of people half-assing, not doing jobs they're supposed to be doing? Because that's an interesting interpretation of Avatar.
I gotta think Avatar is ranked a little higher than the Lakers right now, I think.
Yeah, that's a very interesting comparison. I'm like, it's not like Avatar is this dysfunctional, falling apart product. It's just something that's weaker in the story.
If you say that it has no story,
Avatar's in the play-in.
Substance.
Avatar's in the play-in tournament, I'd say. It's like having a top 10 offense with a bottom 10 defense.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, which is better than the Lakers.
It's true.
I mean, I'm gonna be honest. I just think if we start applying this lens to other movies we like, we realize it's a really unrealistically critical lens.
A lot
of really good.
To ask for a good story, that's not overly critical.
Like we talked about Top Gun being an amazing movie, but you yourself talked on the record about how the story was nothing amazing, but that wasn't what the movie was about, and that wasn't what made it great.
But you cared about the characters.
Yeah, and that's okay.
Well, that's very subjective.
Yeah,
also.
It is.
But my point is that I'm not holding the story of a movie like Top Gun against it, regardless of whether I'm a fan or not, because
I think you should hold it a little bit against it. If it had a better story, it'd be a better movie.
I mean, it's the same way I don't go and watch a grounded drama and then be mad that it wasn't a visual spectacle. It was never meant to be that, and that's okay. You don't judge a fish by its ability to fly. You judge it by what it's trying to be. But if you're judging it by something,
fish.
But movies need stories.
I'm gonna throw something at you, Brian.
Movies need stories. I don't know how else to put that.
They do have a story. It's just sometimes they pick what they want to put the most.
Untrue, Wes. Untrue. Not all movies need stories. Not all stories have to be
mainstream
3-act things. Not all stories have to have conflict. Not all stories have to have stakes.
You don't have to put things into a box.
Movies could be come in a lot of different flavors.
All right.
And I think you're putting a premium on one thing. That sometimes isn't always going to work out, as Savon said, no matter how much money you throw at it.
All right. The thing that I struggled with, I think, on the first one was really about and when I watched it the first time, I think it was just about Jake Sully was just not particularly interesting. I was kind of invested in a story. I wanted him to live. I wanted him to live. I got that, like, he was like having a hard time and that he was going to be able to, like, maybe if he could get into the new body, then he would be able to, like, walk again and things like that. And he was learning about himself. And I got mostly invested in that story. But like overall, it really felt like, oh, they're doing Pocahontas again, but like not as, like, the villains didn't matter. The villains were just like caricatures, but like not meaningful. And there was just like a lot going on that didn't fit together. It just felt like, oh, like Fast and the Furious. It was like, we want this set piece, and then we want this set piece, and we want this set piece, and then like there's a loose story in there somewhere, and so it just felt like that. And then as we went on, and thinking about that Pocahontas comparison, it just started to feel like more and more racist a little bit. Like, ooh, like, are we just using like people who are like look indigenous or act indigenous as like ways to like serve this like white guy, and like Brian called it like a white savior complex and stuff like that. And it felt like that. Like, oh, these people who live in this area and are experts in their native environment, right, in the place that they grew up, and then like their job was to somehow support the other guy coming in who was just a random guy, and now he's the savior, now he's the hero. Like that sucks. So I think like that started to become more problematic as the years went on, and thought more about the movie. And I think other people have written more extensively about that, in different places. So that's kind of where I was on this one, coming into this. So again, not super excited to see this movie.
Yeah, but I think you bring up a good point. Like there's a lot of time in between
to
the
digest
two
them, right?
movies, right? And we know that society on a whole has changed, especially what's more conventionally acceptable now.
Yeah, but it was was already problematic when it came out. It wasn't like, oh, this isn't like a 1940s movie where you're like, well, really different, right?
But I mean, come on, just like in the past 2 years,
for sure,
there's almost a sea change in how people want to treat people of color, marginalized communities, even thinking about indigenous cultures and people. So 13 years is a big amount of difference for people to feel differently and approach Avatar 2 in a new way. I can tell you though, Wes, after sitting through 3+ hours of it, I don't know that they have solved any of those problems.
Interesting.
Maybe, sort of. I don't know.
Interesting.
Well, let's dive in then. So, what was notable about this? I'm going to kind of go off script here. What was notable? What was interesting? What you like? What you didn't like? Sav, how did you sort of take in the movie? It's a $400 million movie in the U.S. alone, $1.7 billion worldwide. Like, people are watching this movie. They're obviously like going multiple times. What did you take away? Does it justify that? Like, is this movie the movie people should see?
One, I think you got to be somebody who can deal with long movies. Some people, just regardless of what's in the movie, you're not gonna like a long movie. I think that's worth noting. So if you're just
let's assume that they are, because $1.7 billion worth, people are willing to put up with the 3-hour movie here.
I think so. I think there's just so many extended, beautiful sequences in the movie that I look and say, man, it's a long ass movie. I'm glad they didn't cut this. Maybe there's an argument, Brian, I think you might agree that maybe some of the final act when they're having the conflict at the ship, I think some of that could have been a little bit shorter.
Also, I think we could spoil this. So many people have seen it, and the people who probably aren't going to see it. I think we could do spoilers on this one.
Wes is not going to see it.
Yeah. So either way, when they're having the final,
but
I'm saying when they're having a final fight on the ship, nonetheless, when it's sinking, I think that sequence probably went on maybe 10 minutes longer than it needed to be. Either way, you're still getting a 3-hour movie. Like, no matter how you spin it, there's no version of that. But
well, now it'd be 2 hours and 54 minutes instead.
Yeah, but there were a lot of really just beautiful sequences where I'm glad that they didn't leave this on the cutting room floor. And James Cameron on the record talked about how there's even longer cuts of just stuff. And the way the movie played out, I could tell, like, oh yeah, he probably would want to spend another 30 minutes explaining this particular cultural tradition or creature or whatever. But I enjoyed it. I think it justified its length. I think what I was most excited.
Did you see it in 3D?
No. I wear glasses. That's just not 3D is just not for people.
Oh man, you missed out.
It's fine. I'll be okay. I never was a fan of the 3D trend to begin with. But What I will say, I think what made me enjoy this movie was, especially as Avatar aged and we talked the things we just talked about, I feel like the world building of Avatar is a really dope template to build off of. And so while us introducing us to this world in the first movie unfortunately lent itself to a lot of tropes that I'm not a fan of, the white savior, all of that stuff, which is valid and true. I think us opening up this larger world was still really leads for some dope concepts. And I personally felt like the movie did a better job of, like, I didn't really feel a white savior complex in that movie, Brian, just from who the villains were, what the larger conflict was, which was my biggest issue. In fact, Jake Sully's kind of on like the L end for a lot of the movie. If we're gonna really keep it a bean, he's not in a position to be like a badass for real, for real. But I enjoyed that they explored a lot of really cool concepts in this world that they fleshed out, and I'm glad I got to spend a lot of time there.
One of the people that responded to my Instagram story that you maligned, Brian, was Miles. So friend of the show, Miles. Shout out to him. He said that he felt it was kind of boring, but one of the things that he was like, man, it just doesn't make sense is that Jake Sully, who's maybe lived there a few years, right, on Pandora, is oftentimes calling the shots around like where to go, what to do. We're gonna go hide out with these people. We're gonna go to this area, and he's like, and Zoe Saldana's character, Neytiri, doesn't really. It's just sort of a passenger, just kind of like going along for much of the movie. And he's like, that makes no sense. Like, she's lived there, she grew up there. Why would she not be more of an agent in terms of deciding what to do and how to respond to these things in a place that she's more familiar with? And the only possible, like, having not seen the movie explanation, I was like, well, like, there are some people who go to a place and they like explore everything, and there are some people who are homebodies and they just stay home. Like, I'm one of those people. If someone came here and the zombies took over to Austin and they were like, Wes, where should we go that's safe? I'd be like, fuck if I know, man. Like, I literally go to school, I come home, I go to like my in-laws house, maybe I'll go to a couple restaurants, and that's about all I know. I wouldn't know all the good hiding spots. So maybe that's what happened. Maybe Jake is just an explorer by nature, but that's kind of silly that, like, again, right, indigenous folks, or like, this is supposed to be kind of an indigenous story, right, that like the Na'vi are, again, like, pumping up or being basically just supporting to make Jake look better, right, or to give him powers that he didn't have before.
Well,
I don't think that happened in the movie. Did that really happen, Brian?
I mean, yes, but Jake and Neytiri are kind of side pieces in this whole movie. Right?
Yeah,
it's really more. The movie is
about
really
the youngest son.
more focused about their
movie.
children.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and how they're navigating everything. Like, yeah, sure, Jake is making decisions about things, but it also seems like Neytiri in this storyline, she's now a mother of several children, and she's really taking on that role of like a kind of like our traditional understanding of mother. That's her primary concern in all of this. And Jake is more focused on just protection. He's just all about protection. But really, the thrust of the movie is about the children and how they're navigating things. I think so. Like, to me, that's not really the problem. To me, what the issue is with this movie is more so like just the portrayal of the Na'vi, and I forget their Na'vi counterparts who are more of the ocean variety rather than the forest variety. Like, when they meet them, it's just like, okay, like, yeah, so they're extending the indigenous cultures of the Na'vi, right? They're also basically stand-ins for Native Americans and now Pacific Islanders. Like Native Hawaiian people or Maori people. And you can tell in this movie that they're just throwing in random cultural artifacts from those cultures. Like, they do like the Maori haka at such a random point in the movie, and like with like very little explanation, and it just seems really disingenuous and put on. Basically, like, the creators of the movie were saying like, oh yeah, here are like all these things that various indigenous cultures do, let's throw them together in this, and it'll feel real. but to me it just felt completely empty and like a stereotype. It felt like even more of a stereotype the way that they portray it. And I think, one of the reasons why it feels that way is because most of the people portraying the Navi, even though they're blue on screen, are not indigenous in real life and have zero real connection to this. And some of the kids in this movie, like they put on this weird accent too. Like, even Zoe Saldana puts on a weird accent. It's like all this stuff kind of feels like people are just playing at something. And so that's how I felt about this movie. I think a really interesting comparison, when we're thinking about portraying cultures and people in a more satisfying way, is thinking about Wakanda Forever, and the people of Wakanda and the people of Talokan, to me, feel very real and very earnest and not caricatures in the slightest, even though both of those are mythical cultures, or
And
completely
combined cultures,
fabricated.
right? Yeah.
But they are taking, as I mentioned with the Navi, they're taking real world things and attaching them to these fictional cultures. And so, I'm not entirely sure how to articulate why they
Why it
feel
worked.
extremely different, but definitely in Avatar 2, it's kind of put on. It's kind of put on. I don't, I think it's disingenuous. And so to me, like, what's like way more interesting actually is not the Navi. It's actually the normal human beings and all the sci-fi and futuristic engineering that they're using as a means to reap the material resources of that planet or moon and profit off of it. And like all the cool details that they put into that, to me, feels way more real and interesting, and not disingenuous. And like that, to me, like that was actually some of like the most fun watching them take down their version of a whale in Avatar 2 is really detailed, very mechanical, kind of awful, but also really fascinating to watch unfold on screen. So like this movie has a lot of this kind of like ambivalent thing going on here, where there's like plenty of bad stuff. There's plenty of stretches that get a little boring, but then there are also these long stretches where it's like, wow, that is amazing to watch, and I love every detail that they put into it. And
Hmm.
so and you can also take that, use that as a paradigm for thinking about the story as well, which we haven't gotten into too much, but like even the main antagonist becoming a Navi himself, you know adds new nuances to some of like the problematic white savior thing going on in the first movie. But I've been talking a lot, so yeah, Savon, you're clearly thinking.
Yeah, so I'm going to. So this is some food for thought, is what I'll say, because this isn't necessarily what my hard opinion is, because I need to do some still reflecting. But I think it's food for thought in reference to a lot of what you said. What makes the depictions and drawing from other cultures and how it's put together in Avatar? How is that different than, say, Avatar: The Last Airbender, something that does it extensively through multiple Asian cultures, and I think and doesn't do like even an alien stand-in, and I think are very much very on the nose about their depictions of like what is meant to be, ancient China, Imperial Japan, uh, Filipino cultures. You get the idea of the Buddhist monks, all of that. And then even thinking about, so there's that. And even thinking about, let's think about actors who portrays them, accents, all of that. And then even think about Wakanda Forever, a movie that I think when you really like, when you on paper, maybe on paper it's different than what it is in reality, but to your point, draws from different African cultures, combines them to have their own unique thing, is still played heavily by American actors who are putting on accents. It just makes
True,
me
very
like,
true.
it's just something that I'm not saying I disagree with you or I hard agree, but I think it's good for us to look and see where we might be unintentionally applying double standards to other pieces of media that are very much doing something that another one does where we feel more critical. Now, whether one is more authentic, I'm not going to sit and argue that, because that's not something I think I've thought about enough in this space to speak out and, give an informed take. But I think there's a fair argument to make that what is the line between what Avatar has done in having a culture that's clearly drawn from real cultures to create its own thing that might not be portrayed by people who are directly connected to that, and other media that do the same but are celebrated. I don't have the answer to that, but it's just something to, something to consider. Like, think about how many American stories have people who, is there a line between a story that takes place in America where someone who's not an American plays that role? I think about how in Hollywood, a lot of like Black British actors will play roles that of American actors, and that's a way to get work. I guess it's just what do we? Each of us has to individually reflect on what is that line between authenticity, just co-opting something, which I think it does exist, and then what are these nuances between different ones? Like, what does Avatar do right that Avatar: The Last Airbender do right that this movie didn't, to where they're doing similar things, but one is celebrated for it and another is deeply criticized for it? I don't know the answer, but something we should think about.
I think those are all fair questions. To be honest with you, I don't have like a very clear answer.
Oh yeah, and this is rhetorical. This is rhetorical. This is like I'm not going to put you on the spot and say, give me an answer to that right now. But, Chadwick Boseman was an American dude putting on the accent to play a African king. Where do we draw the line?
Yeah, I mean, I'm also not one who I don't really care as much as the internet does about.
But people are allowed to care. Like, it's a valid thing to be, because I think when I see really inaccurate depictions of my own culture, I'm like, yo, what the hell is this? So like, I get it. Like, I'm not going to try and downplay it just because it's not my immediate culture, because all it takes is another movie to do it in the shoes on the other foot, and I'm feeling the same way, and folks are saying, oh, it's not that big of a deal. So I'm not gonna, but I think this is good food for thought of just how we consume and reflect on media. But to be clear, I don't disagree with your points about maybe the authenticity of their inspirations for these different Na'vi. Although from a more theological perspective, I loved it, but that's its own thing.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, I'm not one who thinks that a character who's meant to be a New Yorker needs to be portrayed by a native New Yorker. Like, I kind of don't care about that aspect of it so much as what feels right in that film or show or whatever. And I think Avatar: The Last Airbender, as we all know, the superior Avatar in all of this, just feels way more real and better, and it feels like there's like maybe a reverence and humility that the creators have for what they're portraying that doesn't translate in Avatar, the Pandora Avatar, in Avatar: Way of the Water. And I'm not entirely sure what that is.
Yeah.
But
me neither.
I think a lot of, based on the 3 other people I've talked to about this movie, we all sense it. We sense that. So there's something empty going on.
It's something. It's something fun. It's something that's curious to unpack. Like, it's something I definitely want to unpack further down the line. Because I'm like, it's interesting food for thought of, what does it look like? What is it not? Because clearly you don't just check a box of, oh, now it goes from authentic to not authentic. It's a feel. So you can't quantify a feeling. So, but it's still fun to unpack. All right, you can't quantify, but we can still, have a better understanding.
Agree. There's a spectrum of where are you from, like, this is completely, co-opting, or what's the word that gets used a lot?
Appropriating.
Yeah, whether it's like appropriating, it's tokenized, it's commodified, right? Like, and having not seen the second one, I don't think I can't comment on like what made it feel inauthentic to Brian, but I think part of it is that in having seen Wakanda Forever, there's a care and a beauty that gets shown through these traditions that they put on screen that makes sense within the context of what's happening in the story or what's happening to the characters. And they get used in a way that it's not just like a one-hit wonder. It's like these are things and themes and practices that get shown like throughout the movie and aren't necessarily things that we see every single day or often as like viral moments or things that get put online, right? So they had to the creators of Wakanda Forever had to go either do research or talk to people who are familiar with these cultures to incorporate them into their story. They weren't like the most obvious things that we've seen, like that everybody has seen, right? So there was some care and effort put into that. Whereas like everybody has seen a haka if you've been on Twitter or Reddit or Facebook or Instagram in the past 20 years. And like if that's the only thing that you did, if that's the only piece of Maori culture that you know, you didn't go very deep.
Now, what
right?
if I told
and
you
so,
they
like,
did
is
do
that
that,
part
but it
of,
still
I don't
comes
know if
off?
that's part of it. What'd you say?
Well, I'm saying, I guess, because I was reading about some of the production, I feel like there was a lot of that, but it still leads to that inauthentic feeling. I think there's something deeper than that, because you can, right? It's not as just simple as, oh, I did deeper than the surface level, and then that makes it authentic. Like, I think there is still something else that's missing, because I don't have any doubt of just about the sheer volume of even stuff I know like, I didn't know from my own just understanding of these Pacific Island cultures, that they probably did a lot of their homework about this stuff, but that doesn't necessarily automatically make it authentic.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, maybe they did, maybe they didn't.
Like, I don't want someone to think reading a book about something and knowing it in depth or something makes it authentic. It makes it knowledgeable, but knowledgeable doesn't mean authentic.
For sure. Yeah.
And I think that is the
I agree.
Some people are not knowledgeable of their own cultures compared to certain scholarly experts, but they're still more authentically connected to it.
Of course.
Like, they probably spent $1 billion making this movie. I'd be surprised if some of that money didn't filter down to the research department. But yeah, something doesn't translate. Maybe part of it is that everybody's in blueface, and the whole blue thing. Maybe something about that makes it not translate as well. It's
but
like
humans have been better. Like,
they're just like further disconnected from the thing that they're depicting, because they're and
it's
blue,
like if you're
fictional,
if you're a blue character in a different place, why would you do a haka? That's very specifically generated out of one specific culture in one specific island in the middle of the fucking Pacific Ocean. Like, why would that same exact dance or same exact movement?
I mean, that's just the same way in comic movies. Everybody speak English or everybody looks like a human. Some of that is just
different.
Some of that is just movie stuff, bro. You know how many alien cultures clearly have things that are drawn from. Dog, in Guardians 2, they had a whole culture that had like arcade pods to battle. Like, when you do alien cultures, no matter what, I think some of that is no matter what, alien cultures are going to be inspired from like real life culture, because everything's derivative. Like,
yeah, inspired, but is it the same? Like, if you pull out the haka with an alien race, why? Like, there's no good reason why an alien race would exactly do the haka unless they were specifically trying to communicate using your own cultural practice, and that doesn't sound like that's what happened here.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's awkward. There's a lot of awkward stuff in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, for the record, I enjoyed this movie top to bottom. I was happy. Yeah, for the record, like, some of this I'm like entertaining because I enjoy just the food for thought conversation. But I do want to be clear, I enjoyed like all the like visual stuff and how they did all that. I enjoyed it. Like, I think I thought how they did the distinction between the different cultures was cool. I thought all of just the water shit and underwater stuff and underwater creatures I thought was lit. I think I like that Jake Sully got knocked down a peg from the start because he decided to abdicate power because he wanted to protect his family. I like that he kind of just got a depower right off the bounce. He's not just in the driver's seat this movie. I love that we got a movie that really explores the complexities of, I think, blended family dynamics, right? You have an adopted son. You have an adopted human son who's in a weird place. You have a surrogate adopted Na'vi daughter from someone else who's a significant character. You got two sons of a famous war chief who are still judged by their heritage of being part human, but also the pressures of being the sons of a leader. You got the golden boy son dynamic with the fuck up who can't do things right. Like, I'm glad that I got a movie that was about the kids and less about Jake, because I did find Jake to be not a particularly interesting protagonist in the first movie, and he works better as a tertiary character who maybe moves along major plot points, but it's not about him. There's multiple times in the movie where Jake is wrong because we got to see it from the perspective of his youngest son, who is misunderstood throughout the movie, and we get a lot of time with him. Like, so I want to be clear. Like, there's a lot of things in this movie I was watching. I was like, yo, I'm genuinely enjoying these dynamics play out because he has a big family and they all just got different priorities and different things going on, and it is fun to watch.
Brian,
Yeah.
was there anything that you pulled out of the movie that was like, oh man, that was like cool, whether it's story, theme, I don't know, happenings?
I mean, everything that Savon listed in terms of, having a good time with the movie, it is there. I definitely, don't get me wrong. I have a lot of quibbles with this film, but it was still fun. I'm glad I saw it, and glad I saw it in 3D. Savon, you missed out. Because
Oh wait, can I say
3D
something about the 3D? Because then I want to ask you something.
Yeah, sure.
So in the first one, this was back in the heyday of 3D, right? So everything was 3D. Harry Potter was in 3D around this point. But 3D was being used really as like a gimmick. So like things would like come out of the screen at the audience, or things would be floating. And so there was just like it didn't seem like it served a purpose, right? Whereas when I went to see Avatar and I saw the first Avatar in 3D on big screen and everything, and it was probably the first movie in a long time, or maybe ever, that I can remember where everything was just subtle. I remember watching the scene in the first lab where they're kind of introducing everybody, and you're seeing the characters walk in front of each other. There's like just the console in the middle. The pods are kind of arranged around the side of the room, and everything just seemed subtle. It just gave the room depth. And this was true throughout the movie. So this happened over and over again, in the forest scenes, everywhere basically. It wasn't a gimmick. It was literally the 3D was just there to give you the sense of like, oh, how big is this room? How, like, where are the characters in relation to each other? Not that you can't figure that out, obviously, just visually, but it just gave it a little bit more immersiveness. And it never felt like they did anything with the 3D to make it feel like this is about the 3D part of it. It was just a movie. It was in 3D, and it just like added a little bit of immersiveness. A, was that true for this one too? And B, were there any other things that you felt like technologically were done at just a higher level than other movies have maybe done things in the past? I know there's a big thing on like the performance capture mocap or whatever on this one, but those are things that have been going on for a while. Did you feel like this movie technologically was sort of like on another level?
Well, I mean, part of the reason why there's such a huge gap between Avatar 1 and 2 is because James Cameron is in basically having technology invented to be able to make the movie that he wants to make. So essentially,
Brian is on James Cameron's PR firm budget,
no, I mean,
by the
it's
way.
true.
No,
though.
I mean, it's
No,
true.
it's actually, it's true though. He's
Just
done.
regurgitating the PR line, Brian.
Do you
I
know
like
how long it took to make the first Avatar? Even
They couldn't do
I mean,
mocap underwater. Like, they didn't know it was. This is the first time that's ever been done with this movie.
This podcast is sponsored by Disney Plus. You can get your subscription. Use the promo code Confidently Wrong.
Hey,
Oh
if they want to
God.
give us some money, I'm totally down with that.
Especially if we're just saying things that objectively happened.
No, but like when you watch the
It's
movie,
myth making. James Cameron myth makes about his own
I
process.
think no, but think about this: like there are no more 3D movies, right?
Yeah, they've
until
fallen out.
yeah, they've fallen out of favor until Avatar 2 came out, and it was so weird getting those glasses again for the first time in I don't know how many years.
It's been years.
And it really does justify itself as soon as you start watching the movie, right? Because like beforehand there's a couple trailers. There was even a Guardians trailer that was in 3D, and it's exactly as you said. You can tell like it just seems silly, like it
Like, what are we
in a
doing
way it
here?
almost flattened out the movie, right? Because it's in 3D, and I don't think it was intended to be in 3D. They basically just have like 3 different planes
Yeah.
that the characters exist on.
It's like the Marvel
Very
Snap
flat
3D
planes.
effect.
Yeah, exactly. It's like something you'd see on a website, right?
Very
And it's
cheap
like-
thing they do later.
Yeah, it's after the fact.
Yeah.
But then as soon as Avatar 2 starts, you're like, oh crap, I'm in Pandora. This is completely immersive. And a lot of it, the things that I noticed was basically how 3D was used for light and light particles or like dust particles floating in the air or water particles splashing around. And that's the kind of stuff where you just felt like, oh my God, I think I just got hit in the face by a wave because I'm in the water with these characters. And so I think they nailed that technology, and and because all of it is created in CG, right? They do the mocap, and then all of Pandora and all the characters that you see are entirely CG, but they don't feel feels nothing like a Pixar movie, right? It feels very much like this place exists and that we're there with them, that they brought cameras to this place. That is an incredible feat of filmmaking. You gotta applaud that. And for me, that's actually what makes the 3 hours and some change worth it, and all the other issues and problematic politics I have with the movie fine. But it's a really cool experience when they go inside the mouth of their de facto whale.
The visual
That is
storytelling,
awesome.
bro. Like
That
the
is
visual.
so cool. Like, I don't know. Like, so one good thing about the politics of Avatar is that James Cameron is definitely all about scuba diving and really cares about the planet and nature. And if you don't walk away from this movie feeling like you're not in profound awe of nature and all its splendor, even though this is CG nature,
Completely generated,
completely fabricated, like its representation just, it makes me want to jump
Nature's
into the water
dope, yo.
immediately. Yeah,
Nature's
it's like,
dope, yo.
representation matters.
oh my
Yo,
god,
literally
wanna
touch grass. Touch
I wanna
grass.
touch- yeah.
Touch some grass, you heard me?
I want to caress a tree. I want to say hi to a dolphin. Like,
Right?
that is what this movie does. And you're
Put
like,
my
holy
arm
crap.
out.
I gotta go travel the world right now. Like, what am I doing at my computer?
Amen. Amen to that.
Was there any Swahili in this movie?
Oh
Yeah, I mean,
there's lots of
That's the
Swahili.
whole premise. That's the whole premise of the
Swahili-
planet's. That's the whole
Oh.
premise of the planet's existence.
The
which,
crazy part is that they communicate with whales, and the whales communicate back. Like, they can have full-on conversations with the whales.
Yeah, can I
Go for it.
that was one of my favorite. That was probably, I think that was my favorite part of the movie. And this is where, again, I know there's the issue about how they represent cultures and all that and use elements. But
These
I
are
still
big deals, guys. I mean, I know we talked about it a lot.
we talking about the movie.
Yeah,
we talking about the movie. Like,
We're being fair and balanced over here. Confidently wrong.
I still enjoyed this movie, and I'm not gonna feel bad for enjoying it. Like, I'm just
liberal
not.
cards are getting revoked today, guys.
I don't rock with the liberals. I don't like them.
That sounds like Trump. I'll work with them.
I don't like them.
I'll work with them.
I don't like none of them. They all trash. One is just less trash, but that's like, okay, cool. It's not the bar is in hell. Anyways, what I liked was that I still think that the Avatar movies, I still appreciate it. I think that for all the critiques they get, I think they've built out some really cool, unique, original concepts too. And the idea of these whales pretty much doing what whales do, but leaning into how intelligent they are and our real world equivalents, but taking it to another level of them pretty much outlining like, hey, they're significantly smarter than all of us. Like, it's not even a competition. They blow us out the water. And talking about how they had their own culture, right? Like how they're literally a pacifist culture and they have an outcast because he went to war, and there's hints of them having their own philosophy and composers. The fact that these whales really have full-on tattoos and really, that I didn't expect.
Did the whales like get subtitles or like what's the?
Yeah, they get subtitles.
Yeah,
they got subtitles.
Oh,
but they're making whale noises, so the squeaks, the all that stuff, but subtitles, and they just did a great job of making them be able to clearly emote through their multiple eyes they have on one side. Like, whales are very big, majestic creatures, but they don't have maybe that.
They don't have a lot of expressiveness.
Exactly. And they did a great job.
And if you do it, it looks cartoony, right? It ends up being a shark's tail.
Exactly. Looks like a cartoon. But the way they just had the whales swimming in sync with the Na'vi who they were communicating with, and the tattoos, and they really did a great job of saying, hey, no, it's not like whales are smart like they are here. No, they're like sentient, smarter than us, and they showed that. And I just thought that entire concept was just...
Do they have hands? How did they get tattoos?
Who knows?
They're
smart. They're smart.
You asking too many questions.
Oh, okay,
but I think it's implied I think they just have a very tight symbiotic relationship with the Na'vi.
Gotcha.
So it's like they literally talk about how they meet one after the mating season and they catch up on deaths, introduce each other to each other's respective children. Like, hey, here's my calf. Hey, here's my baby. Hey, so and so died. Hey, blah blah blah. So don't think it too much. But the point is that we know that they're intelligent enough to want to have self-expression, which I think is the point they're making. But everything with the Tolkien, including the outcasts who, to the son's point, right, they didn't kill anybody, but in their culture, leading people to their deaths is just as bad as killing it. And I'm like, yo, this is dope. Like, I would watch. There's definitely like another hour of film in the cutting room floor that's just exploring the Tolkien culture even more. And I love the role that they played in the movie. And maybe the critique of whaling was a little on the nose, but also that's what it's like. Like if the truth is on the nose, then so be it.
The whaling was pretty effing cool.
No,
Like,
it was
the robots that they used to take down the whales, like these crab robots, like that was awesome.
I was
Like,
deeply
that was just well-designed.
uncomfortable that entire scene, and that's what they were going for. And like when they really established how smart they were, so then they're doing this complex hunting thing, I was like, yo, this is disgusting. Like, to Brian's point, if you don't walk away from this movie a little bit more of an environmentalist, I don't know what to tell you, dog. like I'm not saying I'm a nature boy, but like, this is definitely a, man, I'm gonna go for a hike and appreciate the world I live in type of movie once you walk away. And a lot of movies aren't good at making you feel that way.
What's the they haven't put it in the trailers. What's the central, like, I don't know, conflict is maybe a good way of saying it. Like, what's the nature of, like, who's where in the story, like, against
you want
each
this,
other?
Brian?
yeah, so the same military baddie from the first movie.
Not the Giovanni Ribisi character.
I have no idea who that is, but the same bad guy.
Is that his name?
He's basically
Stephen
like
Lang.
he's like a Dolph Lundgren
Stephen
counterpart.
Lang.
That guy. He was like
Yeah,
second
yeah.
in command in the
So
first movie.
he has been cloned, and so has the rest of his mercenary team or whatever they are.
Everyone who died in the first conflict, West, before they sent the people out there, they basically made a backup of their minds and personalities, so that if you die,
Good
they
retcon.
could implant your body into a Na'vi body as basically like a recombatant. Recombatant is what they call them.
So they come back as Na'vi, right?
Yes.
They essentially come back as Na'vi to go hunt Jake,
Okay.
Who's hiding out. All right, and that's what leads Jake to go seek out the Sea Na'vi people. Are they the Tolkien?
No, the Tolkien.
I forget what they're called.
The Tolkien are the whales. That's the whales.
But that's what seeks Jake to go find shelter amongst the Sea Na'vi, who are a little bit different.
Okay.
And
he advocates power.
So you have this reanimated, roided up, angry, like, military dude hunting Jake, but in a Na'vi body. So now he's like trying to understand, how to move around as a Na'vi. He wants to talk like a Na'vi also, so that they can sort of fit in. And he's got his like orphan son, a human boy, who is basically left behind on the planet and raised by the Na'vi, who's like running around in a loincloth and dreadlocks, but blonde dreadlocks.
Because his dad's a white dude,
his dad's a white dude. So, but then like the recombatant version of the dad kidnaps that son and uses him to try to find Jake. And so there's a lot of
that's like the C plot of the movie.
There's a lot going on here.
Okay.
And so I think there are lots of opportunities to correct the mistakes of the original Avatar because people are, constantly going through this process of like trying to understand the Na'vi, right? Like we're literally putting them in their shoes.
Yeah.
Actually not literally, because the Na'vi don't wear shoes. But so like there's this thing about trying to understand going on. And also, at some point, Jake realizes that the reason why the Na'vi are in such danger is because they are constantly after him. He's the problem.
They are beef. He's leading the gorilla. I put in the chat. The reason they're back on the planet, West, all these years later is because Earth is dying. So they're trying to colonize Pandora. Like, that's part of like their long-term game, which is why they're like, oh, if Jake Sully's leading these rebels and people against us, we gotta kill Jake because he knows our tactics, knows human culture, and that's part of why they're so dangerous. Like, just for context as to like Brian's point of Jake realizes he's the problem, or at least some of the problem.
So the Europeans coming to North America, apt here, like escaping their own whatever problems and moving to a new place, but there's already people here, and they're like, whatever, we'll just take it over, that kind of thing. So Did you?
I mean, yeah, the first movie plot.
This has been a long time
Except
that we
the
haven't
end
mentioned
game.
this, or a long time in this podcast without mentioning this. But James Cameron's comments about like indigenous folks or the Lakota or whoever he made his comments about were like pretty horrific. Not horrific. They're
Ignorant.
ignorant and insensitive, right? So
Yeah.
the paraphrase of what he said basically was like part of what he motivated to make these movies is like a respect for indigenous culture and like, oh cool, like that seems great. And then the second half was like, if the Lakota, I think he was referencing the Lakota, had known like what was gonna happen to them or like how horrible the conditions would be, that they would have fought a little harder.
Whoa.
Yeah, I mean that's I remember. I mean that's a really ignorant statement. Like that's some
James
dumb
Cameron.
shit to say.
Yeah, so it's just like,
and he's also talking as if they don't exist now.
Yeah.
Well,
it's
no,
an
I think
ignorant
he does.
statement.
I think, well, yeah. I mean, he was saying like they do exist, and they would have, like, their ancestors would have like fought harder. No, whatever. It doesn't matter. It's just like a gross like simplification of and a reimagining, right, of what actually happened, and without actually doing any kind of like. They probably did do all this stuff, and they were also overmatched. Like, what are you supposed to do in that situation? Like, throw more rocks, or like, like you just literally do not have the like technology to compete against what the Europeans had. Plus, they had diseases that hadn't never been seen on this continent before. So, I don't know, man. It's a weird worldview I think that James Cameron has. Not a weird. It's just a very like.
He an old white
Naive.
dude saying some dumb shit, Wes.
He's grappling with it. That's what you could tell by watching Avatar 2. This guy is grappling with all these things.
That's good.
And that's a kind of progress.
Yeah.
He's evolving. And you see that evolution happening in the movie itself, right?
Yeah,
like,
you don't
basically the conflict is between two white guys trying to figure it out. Like they're on the path to figuring out, and they're fighting each other, and we got 3 or 4 more
movies
of
to
these things that are. We'll see what happens.
Yeah, that's the one thing. This overarching plot clearly isn't over. So some of it is that like, obviously, have whatever takes you want, but some of it is, hey, some of the critiques we have might be resolved in the end of whatever this movie conflict is. Maybe maybe to your point, Brian, of Jake realizing he's the problem. Maybe there is a still, maybe that us recognizing it the way we want him to still isn't out the picture. It's just something that's going to pop up in another movie, because there are multiple thread lines that are left wide open. That's like, okay, this is frustrating, but I'm not going to get too upset because this is a 3+ hour movie and there are literally more already that have been filmed. So just let us some time to breathe. Like the conflict with the mama and Spider, like, oh, they just gonna like, hey, we just gonna pretend that shit didn't just happen. You know talking about, Brian, on the boat when she had the knife on him? I was like, hey, yo, we just gonna pretend like we're gonna do this happy family thing, like she didn't just have a knife up to homeboy.
I wish she just cut him.
Helped save. She did cut him. I mean,
she should have sliced his little white boy chest.
This is what I'll say. This is what I'll say about Miles. He was doing the best he could. He was doing the best he could in terms of just the movie as a whole. The actor was doing the best he could. They did the best they could with the character. Clearly, he was a MacGuffin, and they didn't know how to have it some other way.
Yeah.
He was probably the only real, just like, oh man, but that could have, put it like this, his character could have been a lot worse. It was not my least favorite part of the movie. It didn't ruin the movie for me, which ultimately I'll take that as a win. I'm like, all right, it didn't ruin the movie. Cool. I'm gonna just take this. I'm gonna just take this Pyrrhic victory for what it is.
Because there's a whole other 2 hours and 45 minutes without him in it.
Yeah, they don't like he doesn't eat up so much. Like they give that little squad enough screen time to move their part of the plot forward, but not dwell on it. I'm like, all right, cool. That's only thing that upsets me is that they died safe. Like we lost your boy saving him. I didn't rock with that at all. I was like, oh man, this is an awful trade.
And then
like,
Jake finally acknowledges the second son that who could only do wrong before.
In fairness though,
after the better one died.
Yeah, but in fairness though, bro, that younger son was effing up. So, like that man gave himself no
benefits of the doubt.
He had no benefit. He was acting a dog at the beginning of the movie. Hey, let's go fight. No, man, we're getting up in that. Almost get his brother jacked up. All right, another scene, hey, make up with them boys. Cool. Like, And I'm just like, I got this, bro. I got this. The brother defused the situation. And he just like, and when he did the middle finger punch thing, it was dope. But I was like, bro, you didn't have to do that. Your brother has successfully diffused the situation. It was a 2-on-4. And you decide, nah, I'm gonna get me a sucker punch in. I'm like, dog, you just, and then he lied to protect the other chief's son. I'm like, yo, F that dude. Like, man, you tripping. Like, you lost all brownie points with your pops. And him going back did ultimately get the son killed. I was like, yo, it's tough because I feel for the son and he's my favorite character, but also like, bro, you was effing up. Like, what you want me to say? You know, what you got your favorite student to care about him. It's like, yo, but you effing up. Like, you in the wrong right now, pimp. Like, I don't know what to tell you. You gotta take
Savon,
this lick.
are you a middle child? Is that what this is all about?
No, I'm not the middle. I mean, out of me and my brother, my mom and kids, I'm the oldest. And then out of the rest, I am actually in the middle somewhere. Not the point. Not the point. I'm not the youngest. I'm
This ain't about
fire.
me.
I'm fire. But, well, yeah.
All right. So on Metacritic, the original Avatar 2009, a Metacritic score of 83. Universal acclaim, it got a Metacritic must-see badge. Avatar: The Way of Water, Avatar 2, Metascore of 67. So times have changed. Certainly, it still picked up quite a few great scores from different publications and different writers. Even the Austin Chronicle gave it an 89, an A+. I don't know how they did the percentages here, but
I mean, it's a good movie.
It's an okay movie.
67 is
Look, I'm gonna keep it a buck. I'm gonna keep it a buck, Wes. I've said this before. I do not care what those people. The internet is not a real place. Ask real people for real opinions.
Yeah. I mean, these are real like movie critics who
F them people. I think I care what movie critics have to say less than other people. I think their opinions mean even less to me. I want regular people who watch movies like regular folks.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Like I want like
the
I
regular people about the same. It's about 7.5 score out of 10.
I'm in a camp of just ask somebody you know what they like. Ask somebody you know what you like. If your network like it or don't like it, you can make a call.
My network did not like it.
That's fair, and that's fair. And you allowed to die on that hill and fairway, but yo, I can't take these internet people serious.
I have heard Puss in Boots is good though by word of mouth. I don't know.
See, word of mouth is where it's at, bro. Like,
yeah, for sure. All right, let's wrap up there. Avatar: The Way of Water. Go see it if you want to see a technical marvel with maybe some weaker storylines and some problematic politics. I probably will not be going seeing this, but maybe I'll watch it on Disney Plus when it comes out.
You don't say.
You know what I'm saying?
It doesn't. I mean, not every movie has to be for everybody, right? And that's okay too. But
my new troll bit is I'm gonna start applying the lens of Avatar to everything, and then we're just never gonna enjoy a piece of media on this show ever again.
But you say that, and I don't think that's what's happening though, right? Like it's within the context of the movie itself. I think people can still criticize and say like, hey, that just doesn't work.
All those things are valid. I'm not disagreeing with none of it.
To say that like, oh well, like and we leveled a criticism or we excused Maverick, right, for what they did in their movie. I think that's what it's called. Yeah, Top Gun Maverick, right? But not in Avatar, or when we talked about like Doctor Strange or Wakanda Forever, or whatever, like where they've had weaknesses, but didn't like dock our opinion of the movie overall, and then we do it for a different movie. But sometimes like the thing that like we're saying is like it didn't work. It like really stands out as a reason why this movie doesn't work, right? Sometimes not just for Avatar, but when these criticisms happen and like, or it's like a central piece that needed to work and it didn't for that particular movie to succeed. And so, yeah, I don't necessarily agree when you say like, oh, we don't hold the same candle or the same lens up to other different movies, because maybe that wasn't like the thing that detracted from the movie, or maybe it was, right? And I think it matters within like the movie itself, whether that was the thing that mattered. And made it problematic. So I don't know that you can always say like, well, we didn't say it here and we didn't say it here. It's like, yeah, we didn't say it there because that wasn't the thing that made the movie not work.
All right.
That's what I think. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong. Brian hasn't said anything.
And Wes gets the last word.
Yeah.
Thanks, Wes.
Go see Avatar: The Way of Water. Disney Plus will give us
Wes.
money every time you go see it. Just tell them we sent you. Yeah. Enjoy it. We out. Bye.
Sway Lou.
Nice.